I stopped letting fear run my life, run my movie, run the book of my life that maybe one day I'll publish. I stopped letting fear control me. For so long, I felt that fear was like me being responsible, right? Me making the right choices, because I grew up being the good girl. I was very like, okay, I want to do everything right, and I don't want to make a mistake, and I don't want to get rejected, and I don't want to say the wrong thing. So I'm just going to hide behind the curtains, let everyone else live life, and I'm just going to do the things that I should do. And so I went to college, I moved to Los Angeles, and there I realized that I had been living in this like little bubble in my small town. Well, it's not a small town, it has like over 300,000 people, of Modesto, California. Shout out if you're from the 209 area. For so long, I was like in this bubble, and it wasn't until I moved to Los Angeles where I'm like, wow, people here are bad asses. They're doing great things, and you cannot have fear in Los Angeles because they will eat you up and spit you back out, especially if you work in like the Hollywood and TV world, which is what I was pursuing. So I knew that I needed to be more courageous and just step out of my comfort zone. Even though I moved to LA and I pursued a career in television, there was still a part of me that was still doing things right. After college, I graduate, and even in college, I was like interning in television stations, and I was a nanny, and so I was just focused on school, making money, graduating. And then once I got out of school, I was like, okay, the first thing that I need to do is get a job in TV, because this is what I went to school for. And if you know anything about filming a show, it's long hour days. The crew, the actors, the electricians, set designers, everyone is working very long days, including production assistants, which is what I was doing at the time. And I would be working 12-hour days and getting stuck in traffic, which ended up making my days even longer. And it wasn't until one day that I went on a date with a complete stranger from Tinder where I learned, wow, I have not been living my life. This stranger was the kind of guy who rides motorcycles, speaks different languages, except he wasn't, but that's how like I visualized him. You know, like a movie where the character is just like looking at the sky, and the guy could be like a total loser, but because you don't feel enough or worthy, or you're just like putting them on a pedestal, I was like, this guy is the coolest guy I've ever met. He was just some like tech bro. And I decided to go to his place, and while I was there, complete stranger, mind you, never met him, totally could have killed me, it was like one of the first moments I said yes. But I said yes to something that didn't feel right. I was like a virgin, had been kissed maybe once before, never made out with guys, and here I was at this guy's place who I didn't know, saying yes to hanging out with him. And we played this game of Never Have I Ever, and he took a sip of his alcohol and said, never have I ever slept with a man. He knew what he was doing because I had never, and he wanted to get that out of me. Well, I left his place, not crossing boundaries I didn't want to cross, and I felt such shame at the time. But I did something about it. I said, what if instead of doing the things that I fear in the name of yes that are not in alignment to my values, what if I said yes to doing things that I was completely scared of that brought me closer to the person that I wanted to become? Fearless, courageous, confident, spontaneous, adventurous. And so I said yes to myself for an entire year in 2017, doing things I had never done. And of course, like any content creator would, I documented it on YouTube, and I named that series on my channel Never Have I Ever. If you want to go back to old videos, you can totally watch that. Some of them are cringe, and some of them I'm really proud of that old version of myself. And so I went out and did things I never did. Some documented, some not. Things that I never did, like make eye contact with a cute stranger while I'm walking the streets of LA, or starting a conversation with someone at a coffee shop, or going out on a solo date by myself and not feeling awkward, dressing up just because, putting on a dress and heels and going out with my friends. And then there were adventurous things like traveling to Germany with my sister and our friend, and learning how to surf. And when I say learning, I really never stood up, but I tried. But I loved sitting on the water. If you know, you know. I'm not a surfer. This isn't how you do the surfing thing. This might be a bad sign. But if you know, you know, when you're at the very end of the waves and you just sit on your board, that was a big win for me, even though I did not stand on my surfboard because I was so afraid of sharks. Like, that's the reason I never even tried to do surf lessons. And here I was sitting at the very end of the waves in this like deep, dark waters, not afraid. I learned to snowboard. I tried singing. I tried bachata classes. I went on dates that actually were fun and where I didn't have to cross my boundaries. And that almost lasted 2 years where I really lived by this. Never have I ever. What are some of the things that I've never done that I really want to do, that I'm afraid of? Public speaking, starting my business, quitting my job. I got laid off my last one, in case you're watching this and you're like, wait, piecing the things together. She's a liar. I quit my first job. I was working on America's Got Talent. Ended up at an agency, got laid off of that, started my business. But I did things that I was afraid of, that I never thought I would do, and I did them. And that became my yes year. I said yes to myself for that entire year of 2017. But what I realized then, what I realized years later in 2019 was that I had been doing. I was so gung-ho of like saying yes to myself, doing the things out of my comfort zone, that I forgot to check in with myself. And I was still carrying that feeling that I left behind that night when I played Never Have I Ever with a stranger. And it was shame. I hadn't worked through that shame that night brought me. And I kept repeating things and doing things that weren't in alignment to my values in the dating world in 2019 because I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel enough. And I was still carrying old stories. So that's when I decided that I needed to stop just doing, and I needed to really get clear on who was the person behind the courage, behind the bold steps, behind the adventures and the spontaneous trips, and behind the big bold yeses. And so I started focusing on healing. And it sounds all beautiful, like wow. But I went through it in 2019 and I was still living a beautiful life. I was public speaking, I was traveling, I went to Thailand and Mexico and New York with my friends, and I was building a very successful business. At the time I was doing social media management and getting clients, and everything was good on the outside. But internally, I had lost myself. I didn't know who I was. And so when 2020 happened, I was going to commit to working on my personal growth, like really working on my personal growth, saying yes to the things that healed me mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. So in July of 2020, I decided I would do another yes year. This time, that's what I called it versus never have I ever. Just ways that I can say yes to myself, where I can pour into my personal growth. Within months of doing that, deciding to say yes to myself and having a year where for 365 days, I say yes to what nourishes my mind, my body, and my soul. Not just what seems exciting, like flying an airplane and surfing lessons. And that year, I hired my first personal growth coach. I really leaned in on my purpose and understanding my values and my vision by healing and loving myself and knowing that I'm worthy and being rooted in the being. I found the thing that I was really looking for. The prize was finding inner peace. But through finding inner peace, I met the love of my life. I found my soulmate during my yes year in 2020/2021. It was the summer of 2020. I wanted to do this yes year being poured in my relationship with God, surrounding myself with positive people, loving myself, having a beautiful relationship with myself. And the moment that I surrendered, like, I'm not going to do this by myself, I need God. 1 week later, I met my husband. And that was just like the first, like, like change, like major beautiful change that happened in my life, like within that year of saying yes to myself, it was meeting the love of my life, which he is now my husband. And he was my first relationship, my first boyfriend. I think I was 29. Right after that, I got my first apartment where I lived by myself. I had never lived by myself. I had roommates, and then I lived with my mom. I had roommates for about 8 years, then moved back home with to my hometown with my mom. And it was the first time I had my apartment. And it wasn't just any apartment, it was the apartment that I had manifested. I had seen this apartment before. It was my friend's apartment. I'm like, hey, whenever you move, you know, think of me. And he was like, I'm never moving. A few months later, he moved, and the apartment was mine. And I lived there for 2 years, and I just had beautiful experiences. And I got certified in neuro-linguistic programming and emotional release, which is all about really working with the subconscious mind and helping people let go of fears, not just by doing the things that they're afraid of, but by really tapping into the shame and the guilt and the fear that's holding them back. And that same year that I said yes to myself, I also paid $25,000 in debt. I wrote a list of everything that happened, because that moment, that year, when I chose to say yes to myself for 365 days, I thought it was just going to be a year of healing, a year of meditating every single day, which is something that I did. I did this practice called Ho'oponopono, which is all about giving forgiveness to yourself and others. And so I thought it was, and then I was like dancing every day in my bedroom, just like doing interpretive dancing. I mean, it was COVID, right? Like our bedroom was the place that we were all hanging out, or like outdoors. But it became more than that. I said yes to love. I said yes to self-trust, to hand my credit card to pay for my certification program to get certified as an emotional practitioner. I was like, here's my credit card for this $10,000 program. I paid it off. I paid that off. I paid debt off, because I trusted that my work at the time as a social media manager and a coach, I was also dabbing into coaching, that my work would pay for it. Not only that, I said yes to nourishing my soul. I said yes to healing. I said yes to letting go. I said yes to looking within myself. And no, I did not become fearless. There are still things that I fear, but I'm able to work through them quick, fast, in seconds. I now choose without overthinking. And so if you're in a place right now where you feel afraid, but you're so ready to just say yes to yourself, I invite you to have your own yes year. And your yes year may look completely different. As you heard in this story, is that in 2017, it was all about adventure for me and stepping out of my comfort zone and doing the things that I was afraid of and being spontaneous. Almost like being someone I always wanted to be. And then 2020, it was all about saying yes to healing, to personal growth, to connection, to love, to self-acceptance. So whatever you choose your yes year to be, ask yourself this: if fear wasn't deciding for me, what would I choose? When I asked myself that question, everything changed. I showed up authentically, which connected me to the love of my life. I showed up with self-trust, which allowed me, again, like I said, to pay off debt and build a business and get certified in something that I'm passionate about. And when I stopped leading with fear and I led with self-trust, everything that I desired happened. So I'm inviting you to say yes to yourself. And if you want to go deeper, I do have something in the description below that will allow you to say yes to yourself and make this year the year that you go all in. Okay, I'll leave you with that.